Right. So I apologize in advance that there's not a video of me presenting the video. I looked into it and USC does not provide us with the full version of Zoom. And so that is why you can't see a little picture of me. And then I did look into using a different software and it was expensive and they wanted me to sign up. So I just apologize that you are unable to see me face to face through this. Needless to say, my neuromyth is individuals learn better when they receive information and their preferred learning styles. And so here's the outline of my presentation today. I'm going to start kind of explaining what the myth is and going a little bit more in depth to it. And then I'm going to talk about why this myth became a misconception. And then I'll tie in some reasoning as to why this myth is important in schools. And yeah. So, learning styles. To best understand why learning styles are problematic, it's important to clearly define learning styles. And so, when I was starting this presentation, I was reading a lot of articles, and one of them described an instance about when you get something that needs to be put together. So, when you order something off Amazon and it has an instruction sheet on how to put it together, what do you do? Now, I am kind of a visual person, so if there's a video that goes along with the pictures, I will watch the video and then make it. And I'm kind of that same way for recipes. I like when the recipe has like a video component to it. On the other hand, my brother does not want the instructions, does not want any help. He's more of a hands-on guy. He just wants to put it together the quickest. So kind of think about that as I continue. What do you think are the best ways you learn? And so the idea of learning styles is that there's a stable, consistent method that individuals take in, organize, process, and remember information. And by teaching those methods, students learn better. So at face value, the concept of learning styles makes sense. Students learn differently. Most educational settings are trying to reach large numbers of students in personalized ways. You would think it would be useful to have this theory and that would help all students learn. But as we know that this is a myth, so I'll get into why this is a misconception. And here's a little random fact. Did you know that there are actually 50 different theories of learning styles studied by various researchers? So for countless years, researchers have been trying to find the correlation between individuals and how to help with learning. And I'll go into a little bit depth on the next one. And so one of the ways that researchers have kind of conceptualized learning styles is through the VARK theory. And basically what the VARK theory means is it looks into 4 different ways individuals take in information, and it's through visual learning, auditory learning, reading/writing learning, and then kinesthetic learning. Um, and to go a little bit more in depth, visual learning, visualizing the connections between many topics. For example, a flow chart. Other presentations of data might be like maps, spider diagrams, charts, graphs, flowcharts, label diagrams, and others. For auditory learners, they learn best when information is spoken to them or they prefer listening to it. So these students like reading aloud to themselves and do well in groups where vocal participation is present. Read/write. These students with the read/write learning style succeed with written material on worksheets, presentations, and other materials containing a lot of text. They take notes and perform well when they can refer to written materials. I was kind of like that in school. I like to be able to refer to written material. And then lastly, the kinesthetic learning approach connects academic work to physical activity. This is an area I kind of wanted to look more into. So pacing back and forth, making flow charts, underlining notes, and tapping their legs are a few body actions that aid kinesthetic learners in processing information. I was actually in practicum this last week doing an observation where the teacher let students choose if they wanted like balls to sit on. And so if a student is like maybe has some kinesthetic learning ability or approaches, that would be an example, is them being able to bounce up and down while they're learning. That is kind of like the kinesthetic approach to things. Okay, so on to the myth. So part of the reason the myth became um, a major misconception was the popularity of learning styles. So the different idea of learning styles began to gain traction in the 1970s and has since become a pervasive in education worldwide, with many educators trying to use learning styles to their advantage. A recent study in the US found that 64% agreed that teaching to a student's preferred learning style enhances learning. And um, so the correction of this misconception, um, I found a quote by a researcher, and I think how she put it into words is kind of why it became a misconception. She conducted multiple studies on learning styles and how we like to perceive learning, and she said, "It seems likely that the appeal of learning style myths rests in its fit with the way people like to think about behavior. People prefer brain-based accounts of behavior, and they like to categorize in many ways. This is another example of why cookie-cutter training doesn't work." So, kinda like we talk a lot about in the special education world, we're kind of categorizing students. It's the same type of way with learning styles. We're just trying to categorize students, and it doesn't always work out the best. And so then with this myth comes, there's really no empirical evidence to support it. I will go into more depth about this in my incoming slides, but both the British Psychological Digest and the American Psychological Association both have put out statements stating essentially that there's no scientific evidence to support this myth. Um, and their findings suggest that belief in learning styles may actually be detrimental to learners. And then the downsides, um, in a study of more than 100 higher education providers in the UK, 90% said that learning styles are conceptually flawed. Plus, 67% believe they pigeonhole learners, 61% think they waste resources, and 56% think they create unrealistic expectations, and 48% think they are driven by profit, not helping learners. And then I kind of have a little slide, a picture over here. It says, "Did you know? A study of over 15,000 educators worldwide have found that 89.1 believe that people learn better when instruction is matched their learning styles, while 87.8% believe in learning styles in general." Now, I just threw a bunch of statistics at you. I find them very interesting. I know you guys might be like, "Grace, just hurry up, get to the point." Essentially, a lot of educators think that learning styles are effective, and there's misconceptions about it, and obviously that's why it's a myth. But what's shocking to researchers is the percentage, the amount of educators that believe that this method is evidence-based and that it should be implemented. So it's just really concerning. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And so this leads me to the empirical evidence or the scientific backing to this misconception. So Pashler et al., it was a lit review, and essentially they found no relationship between learning style and educational outcomes. And then the Massa and Meyer article, this looked into multimedia instruction for college students. And multimedia instruction, it's kind of like including visual with auditorial stimulus in the teachings. And so they found that it didn't matter if you were an auditory learner or a visual learner. multimedia did not support outcomes. So that was interesting. And then I kind of wanted to highlight the API press release in 2019. So this came out after an article by that researcher I quoted came out. And the article essentially stated learning styles are a myth. Um, it really, it was like the first article that provided like substantial evidence to support that learning styles are not accurate, and it was a very pivotal moment. And then Rogowski et al. 2020. This article was really interesting because it looked into K-12 students, and not a lot of the research was in this area. A lot of the research stems from higher education, looking into like perceptions of educators. Not a lot of research is actually done on the K-12 students themselves. And so this was also kind of a pivotal article that I wanted to make sure to include. They basically found there was no significant correlation between visual and auditorial learners on achievement, which was huge. And there is extensive amount of research if you guys want to look into it outside of this presentation. I just thought that instead of going through tons of articles, I picked 4 that I found kind of the most um, important as I was going through my review. And so, kind of to tie this back to the school, why is it important that we as future educational staff and support understand that learning styles in schools can be detrimental to students? And so I don't want to say that learning styles aren't good, because some intentions of learning styles are good. The implications of them are more destructive than helpful. So we kind of need to understand that. So by focusing on a student's learning style, we reinforce a simplistic view of learning. Okay? So unfortunately, learning is complex. We know this, and it's not easy. We know that kids learn different ways, and there's so many different methods, and there's so many companies trying to sell you the next best thing. So this is hard and it takes time. Um, Another importance is the misallocation of teachers' resources and time. Um, when teachers work to accommodate different learning styles, which they have no empirical support, they're diverting attention and effort away from instructional strategies that are supported by research. So we're just doing, not only is it taking away time of teachers, it's not the best evidence-based approach for learning for students. And then students may act on their labels. So what does this mean? If a student believes she or he has a particular dominant learning style, the student may avoid effective learning strategies or even entire subjects they believe are a better fit for a learning style they don't think suits them. So individuals are able to control the type of mental processing they use. Students who are taught that they have a dominant learning style may attempt to process information in their preferred style, even when that method does not fit the task. So that leads us with, what is the best learning method? And we've talked about this throughout the whole entire semester. We know that there's not one learning method that's more superior than other. We know that um, what learning method we should use is dependent on many factors, and it's not a one size fits all. But throughout my research to create this PowerPoint, I came about a few different strategies and different things to kind of think about. So one of the common themes that I kept seeing throughout reading through the research and the different articles is aim for personalized content. When students can make a personal connection to what they're learning, the outcomes tend to be very good. So kind of working with teachers on how to best make the content meaningful to the students. And then when we're preparing this content, look for a single clear learning objective. Make sure that what we're trying to get across is getting across. Um, if we're trying to teach constellations, we're not getting into um, the atmospheric pressure that constellations, like we're focusing on what the objective is. We're not including other details that may not be pertinent to that objective. And then look for scaffolded learning. We want to make sure that we're not throwing a topic or a skill onto a student when they don't have the basis to reach that. Sometimes I think the reason students may not like a topic or may not like a class is that we're not making sure that those basic skills and the information is building up to that objective. So we want to make sure that we're scaffolding our learning. We're not throwing a topic that is too far advanced. We got to make sure we're building up to that objective. And then I don't want to say that auditorial, visual, kinesthetic learning is not important to include in um, education. It's still important to look for those audio, visual, or storytelling elements to include in teachings to students. So I don't want to say that these types of different learning styles aren't important, because you can include them into your learning. And then here's my works cited.